The manga opens with a few letters. This term is perfect to describe the nature of the theme this story was about to take place, but it all goes down the drain. Shishido ends up reincarnating into a story in which he would play the character role of a scumbag who takes the girlfriend of the main protagonist. However, he hates to steal women in any sense, and loathes the existence of his character. He quickly remembers a very intense scene between the main female protagonist, who blandly tells Shishido that she hates men like him. As he made a rather calm expression, in the next second we see the actual thing that ends up happening to her. Although she apologized again and again, she was also fully submerged in the abyss of pleasure and lust, and Shishido smirks while muttering to himself that he has his classmate's girlfriend under his palm and he had trained her to his liking. This is why this character's was something that our main protagonist hated, the men who prey on other women. He gets up after experiencing a sharp pain, and as he panted, he checks the time, and when he goes out to wash his face, he reflects that the erotic manga he was reading a few days ago really made him disgusted and gave him nightmares. He notices that his head hurt like crazy, and as he looked ahead, he saw a completely different face in front. He panicked and immediately remembers that yesterday, he got back from work and on his way, the neighborhood friend truck ran over him and sent him to the story he was reading a few days ago. He opens his eyes wide, and he was already reincarnated into the body of the biggest scum of the game, Shishido. Questioning himself in this condition was really not that helpful, and he pondered just how could someone end up in such a condition. Back on Earth, not a single person liked this character, and he was infamous for being trash. The plot of this manga was completely different from all normal stories, and Shishido ends up forcing himself on a happy couple in his class. He takes a few pictures and begins the cycle of meeting and blackmailing her. Things get to the point that the female protagonist completely develops a different mentality and begins to change. Her appearance and habits turn to something he influenced her in. Basically, she became a maniac who loved men and getting embraced. The new Shishido with a whole new software hates this plot, and moreover, he hates the existence of this idea and storyline. Back on Earth, he purchased this manga by mistake and had to read this, but the stupid concept of NTR plots is just a waste of time for him. Although he liked erotic things and events, he still had no interest in hurting anyone with his skills and techniques. Although there were many things that were not shared about this character, it seemed like Shishido had a very terrible and sad childhood which made him into a worse person. But ponders about how this doesn't give him the right to do wrong to others. He questions just how would he live his life in the school where he will start going soon, and how would he interact with the female protagonist. As he got all mustered up from everything, he decided to just take a walk outside, and when he got up, he noticed that his place was stinking and disgusting from top to bottoms, and before thinking about the future he first needs to clean his room. He knows that he hasn't committed any wrong deed just yet, and since it is spring, this is around the time when he begins to follow the female protagonist, and then kidnaps her. As he walked, he noticed that normal people began to avoid him, or simply, they were fearful of him. His face was definitely the main source of this, and as he walked and walked, he notices from the side a girl screamed for help, and their two guys were aggressively trying to force the girl to hang out with them. The girl grunts and cries to them that she would just like to go home, and Shishido makes a troubled expression, muttering to himself that such boring, cliché moments were always filled in this manga. The people around them did nothing and just gossiped, and this made him angry. He calls to them in a cold voice, and when they glanced back, they saw a tall, muscular figure standing and glaring at them with dead and rageful eyes. Shishido grabs the collar of one of the guys and asks if he wants to throw hands with him. He recalls that their useless and cliché yammering has ruined his night walk, and while making an absolutely deafening expression, he tells them to scram right now. They knew they were in much bigger trouble, and without saying anything else, they ran away. The girl who he had just saved mutters his name, and when he glances back, a beautiful girl was standing there, and Shizuna, the idol of the school who could arouse any man she wants, was standing there while clenching her hands. She is also the main female protagonist, who Shishido was supposed to steal and groom. As the silence surrounded, he himself couldn't believe that he encountered an important woman the moment he stepped foot outside. He calls out to her, and she flinches. It seems like the interaction with those two pests really did leave a mark on her day, and she was fearful of him even more. He knew that it is given, and he casually passes by from the side, and with a gentle voice he tells her to be more careful the next time she goes outside. He also apologizes for scaring her. She hears these words and glances back to see that Shishido, the infamous delinquent from the lower classes, had no interest in her. He walks off, and she ends up calling out to him one more time, and when he glanced back, she thanks him for stepping in to help her. The words of gratitude were something that he begged for in his last life, and just hearing these words, he was very happy and spins around with a bright smile at her. For a minute, he became a normal person with all the emotions that one could have, and Shizuna saw this and immediately she freezes. She blushed and runs away, and Shishido was sure that he scared her again. Through this encounter, he realized something very important, and now he knows what he must do to get himself out of the plot route. He just needs to avoid the NTR and not get involved with her or anything related to her. As he looks up, he had no idea that his actions and words were compounding, and things were about to turn messy. Shizuna walks off, and all the men around her couldn't help but pass glares at her figure, but she on the other hand was fixated on a person she just encountered, and she began to mutter his name and reflected that she had no idea that he could smile like that. The next day, as he walked to his school, he remembers that he is a delinquent who does terrible things to girls. And today is the first day of school, and in this storyline he was fixated to avoid all hurtful and depressing plots no matter what. In the class, he is the topic of everyone's concern. They gossiped about him, and when he glared at them, they became rabbits and immediately scattered around. No matter how much he tries to give happy vibes, he fails miserably. Someone slid the door, and Shizuna enters the class, and everyone began to surround her like flies. As the horny men praised her, she casually walks near Shishido and greets him with a smile. He jolts for a minute, and as she thanks him for the deed he did yesterday, it seemed like she was completely different and was perhaps more elegant and straightforward. He shakes her off, and she laughs and mocks him for being as simple-minded and terrible at handling compliments. As the teacher entered, Shishido was just blown away by the audacity of that girl. Not only she was perfectly fine, but she smiled at the person who was supposed to force himself on her and do terrible things. He tried even harder and avoided her more, but he felt a slight tingle from the side, and as he noticed someone glaring at him, he saw a black-haired kid glaring through his soul. As these two meet eyes, he immediately reverts and sits back straight. This is the main protagonist of this manga, the victim of NTR. He realizes the time when Shishido grooms Shizuna to the maximum extent and reveals a different personality, and they both do adult stuff in front of him while enjoying every second of it. To put this character in a much more simpler way, he is the lamb who would get slaughtered when the time was right. His screaming and tearing face still sends shivers to Shishido's spine, and Sohei is the poor soul he needs to respect. He recalls that since he knows no one in the class, it could be possible that Sohei might have misunderstood a few things, and hence his glares were so hateful. As much as he wants the two protagonists to start dating and move on, he had no plans on ruining any relation or doing anything that would land him into trouble. The final school bell rang, but Shishido just wakes up from a wonderful sleep, and the whole class was empty. As he looked at the time, he was beat up and slept throughout the classes. Although he wanted to be woken up by someone, honestly, no one in the class would be interested to even look at him. He gets up and notices that the plants in the vase were barely hanging on to life and were just about to die. The water that they sat in was dirty, and that was the reason for the withering of the poor flowers. He was busy checking them, and from the side, Shizuna opens the door again, and this time she ended up seeing Shishido examining the vase. She asks him about the things he was doing, and he shares that the person in charge of the class forgot to change the water for the flowers, and this made the plant weak and ready to wither. Shizuna was very shocked to hear these things and couldn't believe that he could even care for some random flowers. He realizes that the things that he has been saying lately doesn't suit the character that Shishido portrays. He leaves her with a stuttering voice, and she ends up calling out to him one more time. Outside the class, Shishido was changing the water, and Shizuna was just staring at every action he did, he asks why would she even want to come here with him, and she replies that she was worried for the flowers. Although she hid a few things from him, it seemed like she was very interested in following and seeing the things he would do. It seemed like the flower became slightly more active, and he immediately spins around like a child and shouts to her that they are much better than before. Shizuna lets out a cute giggle and adds that she can't trust rumors anymore. In school he was famous for being the bad delinquent who was avoided by everyone. She smiles and tells him that he is a kind person that she had no idea would turn out to be a wonderful person. He replies and lets her know that he isn't kind and a good person at all, and he reflects on how she is hanging out and praising the person who assaulted her in the manga. Now he really needs to put some good distance around them, so he remembers something that he could try and he calls out to her, and in the next second, he slams his arm near her face and scares her. For a minute, she absolutely got to meet her worst fears head-on, and with a cold voice, he lets her know that a fine woman like her should not get too close to a monster like him, or she would get devoured by him whole. Now he just delivered one of the most dangerous lines with some history to back it up, but Shizuna ends up blushing like crazy and glares at him like a cat in heat. She also began to sweat, and it seemed like she liked getting pressed or something. He immediately remembers that in the manga, Shizuna was a girl with some bizarre and weird fetish which involved her getting pushed down on purpose. He gets back and shakes her off so she wouldn't get stuck on some weird idea, and he immediately leaves her with a troubled expression. Now she on the other hand had a blushed expression. When he got home, he couldn't be more happy to avoid getting himself into a rather dangerous situation. As much as he wants to avoid getting near her, it seemed like everything just leads him and her to collide. His stomach lets out a scream of its own, and he mutters to himself that he is hungry. He runs to his nearby supermarket. Now he has no cooking skills at all, so he was here to grab the discounted ramen for his breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In his previous life, he passed his time by eating instant food, and he cries that it would be repeated this life as well. Inside he freezes as he ended up seeing Shizuna one more time. He reverses and was about to leave, but she ends up grabbing onto him and asks why would he want to leave her when they just saw each other. He grabs a few ramen, and she asks why would he want to eat so many ramen all at once, and he shares that this is all his food. She tells him in a worried tone that it is not good for his health, and he replies to her that he lives alone and this is the best he can do. She apologizes, and as he was to leave once more, he was sure that this time he handled it well, but still spewed a few extra stuff. He turns around ready to leave, but she calls to him one more time, and he makes a troubled expression and asks her in an angry voice what it is, and she blushes and lets him know that she would like to stop by his place and cook him some food. He listens to this, and without an ounce of thinking, he refuses. She kept saying the same thing over and over again. He begins to leave her, but she ends up being a spoiled brat and clung onto him. He clenches his teeth and was worried to death that something could happen, and he decided to play another card. He lets her know that he would walk her home if she is worried about getting picked on by some guys or something, but she ends up making a troubled expression and asks if he really hates being with her. Now being a weak fellow, he fought with her and lost, and she ended up coming to his apartment, and she enters with a loud greeting. She praises him and compliments how clean his place really was and adds that she always thought that he lived in a dirty and shabby place. Without any delays, she puts on an apron and begins to prepare food for him. As he waited, she began to hum and had no worries of the evil that could happen to her. He glances at her, and from the back, it looked peaceful, and he recalls that it has been a very long time since both Shishido and him really had someone else cook something for them. And since most of the life they just survived alone, he couldn't help but wonder if healing is that difficult. She serves him the food, and immediately his mouth began to water. He bites into the food, and his whole world brightens up, and he exclaims in joy and happiness. He gulps everything with a full glass of water. She asks him if this is good, and with a bright smile, he lets her know that it is very delicious and, in fact, it is the best dinner he had for a while. She smiles back, and he tells her to eat her food as well. After eating literally everything that she made, she was beyond happy, but his dumb ass remembers that he can't be any more of a friend with her, and he needs to send her off immediately. She stands up and lets him know that she would handle the dishes, and he tells her to just go, but she unexpectedly slips and was about to fall. He dashes to catch her, and as always, he ends up getting into more uncomfortable situations with her. He opens his eyes and asks if she is fine, and he ends up grabbing her head while he was on top of her. As he jolts back, he apologizes and was about to get back, but she grabs his shirt and pulls him near. Their faces were side by side, and as she realizes this, she apologizes to him, but she was already ready for his moves and going all the way with him. Up until now, Shishito remembers that all the girls that he brought back to his place always had to sleep with him, and he questions if he could get away after sleeping with her for once, and a sudden burst of his imagination shakes his core in which he and Shizuna were having the best time of their lifespan and their sweat and breath was one. He jumps back and immediately gets up from that moment. As he sweated, he was just about to cross the line with her, and this time he knew that he can't be together with her for even a minute. The woman he was with in his imagination was actually similar to her, and that day he questioned nothing else and walked her back to her home. He tells her that all the rumors that she heard about him are actually true, and it is true that he had relationships with women of all types. As she hears this, he explains to her that she can't just come into his place like she did earlier, and if things go wrong he could end up taking advantage of her. She tries to reply in a weak voice and lets him know that in the first place, she isn't a person who would just sleep with any man she sees. From one look at her face, it was somewhat clear that she had some sort of feelings for him, and just earlier it seemed like she had chosen her man or something. He was not about to bother her with this, and he asks her one more time, and she immediately refuses to say anything else. At her place he sends her off, and she calls out to him one more time, and as he glances back, she lets him know that she would definitely visit him again and cook him something one more time. He shouts at her, and she enters her place. Her mother asks why she was so late, and she immediately dashes to her room. Her mother laughs, knowing that she must have a new friend or something, and inside her room she drops down on her bed, and inside her mind was all the memories of Shishito. How he ate her food and made troubled and cute expressions. She also remembered the time when he was on top of her, and just remembering this, she began to pant, and her deepest dark fantasies were coming to life. She imagines getting serious for each other, and she began to touch herself. She calls out his name in an erotic voice and mutters it over and over again, but she was surprised by a loud phone call. She picks it up, and her childhood friend was on the other side of the call, and the first thing that he tells her is that welcome back home. She asks how he knows that she came back just right now, and he replies that since their houses are close, he can actually see her from his place. As they talked, he asked why she is late, and asked why in the class she talked to Shishito. He began to badmouth him and explained to her that he has many relationships and surely has an ulterior motive regarding her body, and she interrupts his chatters and lets him know that she is tired and would talk tomorrow. She tosses the phone to her side, and she was at the stage that no matter what everyone said about Shishito, she was already head over heels for him. Sohei was beyond troubled and immediately remembered his crush to always be together with him, and they also promised to tie a knot with each other in the future. As he began to bite his finger, we see the terrifying and troubled expression that Sohei was making. He reflected on how his dear Shizuna trusted a low-life delinquent more than her closest friend. Over on the other side, Shishito finally relaxes after a hellish day, and someone knocks on his door. He opens it, and his senior, the outgoing Chisa, was right there. She enters his place like she owned it, and complained how boring her event was. This was the friend with benefits that Shishito had, a senior from his class who was just all around the places. She looks around and reflects on how clean of a place it turned out to be, and she leans over and asks if he has a new woman. She was there to spend the time, and both Shishito and Chisa have a very serious and not serious relationship. She invites him to sleep with her, and he refuses. The next day, Shizuna was back at his place, but this time she was outside waiting for him to come out. She really started to follow him around everywhere. As the door opens, she was beyond excited to finally see him, but instead of him coming out, he was with a pretty girl who had wrapped her slender arms around him. Seeing this, her heart starts to beat, and immediately she knew that he was not joking around yesterday when he mentioned that he had multiple relationships with many women. She dashes off, and he immediately sensed that someone was watching him, but he was not able to see her face. As he puts his hand out, Chisa became more clingy, and as he left, she gives him a kiss on the cheek and sees him off. For Shishido, Chisa is a storm that just shakes everything for him. After seeing her crush walking out of his place with a girl's company, she had all sorts of things going on, and she was sure that they must have done something with each other. No matter how much she thought of something else, she was sure that they slept together after she left him. This confirms all the rumors going on about him, and despite realizing this, she questions just why does her heart hurt so much. She was beyond jealous and couldn't believe that the person who she had thought all night had a different woman near him. From the back, her childhood friend pats her shoulder, and immediately she greets him. Now his grip suddenly tightens when she looked at his face, and he began to spew how he was worried the whole day yesterday. She gets a very uncomfortable vibe from him being near, and she slips away from him. She shakes him off, and as she walked, she was very sad. As she kept walking and from the back Shishido dashes towards Shizuna, and he puts his hand on her shoulder and pulls her back. As she smells him and realizes that he just hugged her, she was beyond happy, and her heart began to race. He calls out to her and thanks heavens that she was not hurt. It seemed like she was so focused on her thinking that she forgot that she was about to be hit by a car. He pats her head, and immediately she blushes like crazy, and this just confirms the fact that she is head over heels for him so hard that she can't think of anything else. He realizes that he was so close to her, so he dashes off, but Sohei saw everything and he clenched his bag. After some time, he wakes up on the roof. Earlier, he had lunch and just slept there without any worries. There was a flashback of a woman which just haunted him. In that, a married woman cried out to him about being lonely and stressed out, and he somehow ended up in her panties. As he remembers her cute face from the back, Shizuna greets him, and she smiles at him while standing with a cool pose. As she approached, she remembered how he had a girl with him today, and she began to feel uneasy. She lets him know that since he doesn't know how to cook, she would help him with lunch. He obviously shakes her off, and today he strangely wanted to visit a place which he used to visit in the story. He lets her know about that, and she immediately points out that he should not drink alcohol at all. They kept talking around, and she shouts at him and lets him know that she would come with him to the place he was talking about. He refuses, but the determination of Shizuna was off the charts, and she was the most clingy person ever. But deep down she was also someone who cared the most for him. He reminds her that the place he would visit is not a place an innocent girl like her should visit, and as she argues, a gust of wind blows away her skirt, and from below, he ends up seeing all the software. As she blushed, she sits down, and she calls out to him, and asks him if he saw it or not. Now it is definitely his fault, and he would now need to go out with her to that place. That night she lets her mother know about her plans, and as she leaves, the place they went to was a night district, and bright lights covered the whole place. He tells her to not get lost and watch out for weird men. She smiles and lets him know that she is happy and feels secure since he is with her. He knew that she just kept surprising him with her words, and as they made their way to the restaurant, he enters, and the bartender immediately recognizes him and mutters something to him. The bartender looks at Shizuna and tells her to flee from Shishido, or he would take advantage of her, and he tells him that they are here just to eat something. He lets him know that they are not like that with each other. And he points out that he is different from before. He adds that since he entered and is behaving like a customer, he would surely treat him better than before. They both sat down, and from the back, a customer enters, and Shishido somehow remembered this voice from one of his imaginations. He glances to his side and sees the same woman who was in his dreamland, and from the back, Shizuna calls that woman her mother. And immediately Shishido just froze still. In front of him was her mother, and she looked just like Shizuna but older. There he realizes that he hooked up with his classmate's mother. As he panicked for a minute, the bartender on the other hand complimented him and mocks him for being a player. Her mother immediately changes to a vixen and pretended not to know Shishido at all. He greets her, and Shizuna began to explain all her encounters with Shishido, and the details that she spewed were so direct that he was sure that she just turned into a robot. She began to explain how there is nothing weird going on between them. Her mother smiles, and she sits down, and there a pretty intense conversation takes place. As they all ordered their food, they all shared the table, and cute little talks were all around the place. Shizuna leaves them both for the toilet, and when she did, her mother immediately switches to her real identity, and she smiles at him, and from her expression, it was clear that she was beyond happy just to be there with him. He cries how he never himself imagined this, and another serious conversation ends up taking place. Her mother asks if they are going out or something, and she points out about how her daughter likes spending time with him. She leans over to him and shares how she covered for him, and at least she deserves some of his affection. She asks for a reward, and immediately he pats her head, and she smiles brightly. Now obviously he scored 2 home runs in this time. Shizuna screams at her mother, and she just saw them both getting all close. Her mother points out how she got a little tipsy and shared how she was also checking his muscles. She screams at her mother and lets her know that Shishido is hers. She realizes what she had just said, and immediately she blushes and mutters to her that he is her benefactor. They had a few other talks, and after this, they leave the restaurant. On the way, Shizuna asks him if he is already an acquaintance with her mother, and he jolts. He began to fumble with his words. She points out that she was very surprised to see that both of them saw each other, and stared for a minute, and even became close with each other. She asks if he can call out to her name as well. She forces her opinion and began to shout at him, and finally he gives up, and he calls out to her name once, and her whole world brightens up. When she smiled for a minute, his heart fluttered, and immediately he spins around, and throughout the way, he couldn't stop wondering about the happy feeling he had. Shizuna, although was smiling and all happy, deep down she herself knew that something was definitely going on with the two of them. He walks her back home, and she waves him goodbye. Just as she entered her place, immediately the landline of their house begins to ring, and as she picks up the phone, on the other side, the person was huffing for air, and immediately she cuts the call. She was sure that someone might have called her by mistake, but something was happening. Outside, Sohei was stalking every action of her, and he was beyond control. The next day, Shishido was busy with his own stuff, and he felt someone glaring at him. He looks ahead, and Sohei was the only person present who could have stared at him. He leaves the class and sees that Sohei was aggressively writing something on the paper over and over again. This time he was hanging around in the storage place of the school, and he knew why he was giving him a look of a monster. He must have thought that something is going on between him and Shizuna. He ends up imagining Shizuna all friendly with Sohei, and his heart began to ache. This pain was very uncomfortable, and he immediately brushes his head and collects himself for even thinking of these pictures. No matter how much he thinks he has changed, he recalls that Shishido is trash through and through, and he would surely bring misfortune to Shizuna. From the back, the door slides open and Shizuna enters, worrying and telling him not to sneak around in places with no light. As they both began to talk, all the happy atmosphere vanishes when she asked him about yesterday. She asks if there was something going on with him and her mother. She began to add how her mother also said the same things as he did, and Shizuna was already clear that something happened between them. She already busted them, and she pointed out that her mother's demeanor was different when she was talking to him. With a cold voice, he lets her know that yes, he had history with her mother, and in the past, both of them slept with each other and embraced in the cold, starry night. This was the perfect sentence that he could use right now and send Shizuna away from him, and as he thought of all the possibilities, a sharp pain in his heart continued. In the next second, she smiles and thanks him for helping her mother out. She shares that her mother was very lonely after her father died, and she would cry all the time and sob for him. She shares that the day they both met each other, the next day her mother was better mentally, and had overcome some of the trauma. He repeats the things he said to her, and she kept thanking him. Shishido just had no idea on how he could push her away, and even his best try failed to send her off. He blushes a bit, and she calls out to him again and shares that there is one more thing, and immediately she jumps on top of him. On the other hand, the best childhood friend, over on the other side, was messaging Shizuna over and over again, and it seemed like he was already mentally done for. He cried out how an innocent flower like Shizuna was spoiled by a brute like Shishido. With very uncomfortable eyes, he mutters that he can't go on like this, and he must save Shizuna from getting more ruined by that delinquent. Back to Shishido, his eyes widen, and she asks him if he would sleep with her as well. He averts his eyes, and he notices that she was shaking, and just pushing him down to say a few words took so much strength out of her that she literally couldn't stop shaking. He averts his eyes one more time and lets her know that he would definitely like to sleep with her if a situation like that was to form, and in the next instant her face brightens up and she blushes. She could barely look at him, and she runs off, leaving him there. This was the most intense battle that he has fought, and it seems like he lost this round in a matter of minutes. Shizuna dashed and ran, and noticed that her face was bright red. She was so happy to learn that her crush also sees her as a woman. After the school, he runs back home, and immediately he gets startled by a phone call, and when he checked it, Shizuna's mother was calling him. He remembered that they both shared their contact details with each other, and as he answers, she immediately calls him up by his name, and they began to talk over the phone and they exchanged some edgy and intense conversation. She shares that she would be gone away for work, and asks Shishido to stay with her daughter for 2 days. She apologizes and made a request, but immediately he fires back and shouts at her, but she interrupts him and adds that lately a stalker has been haunting Shizuna. The last time when she was all alone, she received countless letters and multiple silent calls over on the phone. It seemed like whoever was doing this knew everything about her, from her details, to address to even the time she enters her bedroom. She cries that her daughter is putting up a fake expression whenever this topic came up, and she begs him to stay with her for a few days until she is back. He replies and asks if she is sure about this and points that something could happen and he could also lay his hands on her, but she replies that if that happens then she has no other options but to accept their relationship. She points out that he isn't the type of person who ignores other people's feelings and does what he pleases. As he hears this, something clicked in him, and he knew what he would be doing now. He lets out a big sigh and that night he came to Shizuna's place to stay for 2 days. She was surprised to see him all dressed up and she tried to act all surprised, and he mocks her fake acting. He comforts her and reminded her to relax, and he would definitely take care of the stalker, but Shizuna was just too happy to even think and began to mutter his name, and how it is a sleepover with him. Shishido was worried that he might end up going all the way with her today. He eats all the food and lets out a big sigh of relief. He looks at her face, and immediately she points out, and asks if there is something wrong. As she began to flap her hands, she cried out how it is hot in here. He replies that it is early May and it shouldn't be this hot, but she shouts and shares that it is very hot, and immediately she takes off her jacket, and it was clear what she was up to. As she blushed and had no other word to say, he mocks her and began to look at her figure. She shares that he should take a bath first, and he immediately remembers something important. He didn't bring any underwear for himself. He lets her know that he would visit the convenience store and would come back soon, and as he leaves, she exclaims and lets him know that she would like to join him as well. He looked at her outfit and told her to just sit here and wait for him to get back. He also remembered that some creep has been tagging her, so he tells her to lock the door and not let anyone inside. As he left, she began to imagine the things that could happen and wondered if he went outside to bring protection. She was flustered, but instantly her doorbell goes off. She gets up but remembered Shishido's words to not let anyone inside or even open the door, but she still decided to check who was there, and when she looked through the glass, Sohei was standing there with dead eyes. He began to call out to her, and explained that he has something that his mother wanted to give to her. He requested her to open the door. Now the way he was saying this all was very creepy and he just wanted her to unlock the door no matter what, and as she made the biggest mistake of her life, she opens the door and immediately he grabs the door and pushes the door to the side. He had a very predatory smile, and he pushed his way inside. He shuts the door in the next second, and he hugs her very tight, and he began to sniff her over and over again. He also touched her, and she pushed him away. He asks if she received all the letters that he sent her with love. She was shivering from fear, and he began to hug her even more. As she trembled, he cried out how his innocent childhood friend has been stained by that ugly guy, and he pushes her down. He tears her clothes, and he covered her mouth. That psycho began to mutter how he would sanctify her for all the germs that Shishito left on her body. He was about to take advantage. He grins like a dog and he began to drool. In her eyes he was a kind friend who could never do this, but right now, he was about to hurt her. As she cried, from the back, Shishito enters with an epic entrance, and in front of him, that trash was on top of her. With a threatening voice he calls out to him and asks why he was here, and he grabs his shirt and pulls him off that poor soul, and he manhandles him. He glances below and sees that Sohei tore her clothes, and as he screamed at Shishito to let him go, he punches the living sense into him. He drops near the door like a fly, and with a thunderous roar, he screams at him and asks if he was the pathetic loser who was scaring her. Immediately she hugs Shishito from the back and she tells him to not become a monster over this. That trash had thought that maybe his childhood friend was here to fight over him, and as he looks at Shizuna with disbelieved eyes, she approaches to that trash and in the next second, she slaps him hard. She cries out that she cherished him like a brother, and never ever thought of him doing something hideous like this. She lets him know to never show her his stupid face. As he said something, Shishito stood right there near her and glares at that loser. He began to scream like a little child and ran outside. She drops on the floor with a thud, and it seemed like she went through hell. He covers her body, and he comforts her. As the part 1 ends, later Sohei the pest keeps tagging himself around her, and he tried one more time to hurt her. But this time, the tables would turn even more dark.